It's Magella Galvin of D&G Galvin Estate Agents in Bandon, and today I'm joined by Marcus O'Connor of MFO Property Services in Dublin. So we're delighted to have you, Marcus, here today and really value your expertise.
No problem.
Now, if anyone have any questions, you might pop them in the chat and we will try and answer them towards the end of the meeting. And just one caveat here is that this legislation has not yet been written. So our insights are based on the information that the government has given us to date. So we will work from that.
Yeah.
So without further ado, Marcus, you're working with landlords every day. What are you hearing from them right now? How do they feel about the new legislation?
Well, it boils down to the following is that although current, let's say, tenancies are not affected by the upcoming legislation, so what that means is it's not going to be retrospective, okay? Even though that's the case, the landlords, I think, just feel that this piece of legislation is the straw that's breaking the camel's back. And that they, I think, have maybe lost confidence or trust in the government, in that they are concerned that even though the government is saying that it's not going to affect existing tenancies, they feel that maybe something else will come up within another 6 months or a year. And so they have chosen to end their tenancies for the purpose of sale. And we know that because it was very well documented in the media that the RTB has said that in the third quarter last year, there was a 35% increase and spike in landlords issuing termination of tenancies for the purpose of sale. And that's on the existing tenancies. So I think the proof is in the pudding, or the proof is in the numbers.
Absolutely, Marcus. It really is a scary figure. And like you, we are seeing, the number of landlords we are dealing with, the majority of them are looking to get out. And like you said, it's not just this proposed legislation, it
Mm.
really is throughout the years, all the legislation that has been put in place.
Mm. Just to give you an interesting number, if I'm not mistaken, that since the original piece of legislation in 2004, um, there have been essentially, I think it's something like 15 changes, amendments, or legislative amendments done. So it's nearly on a yearly basis now. So that's just
Yeah.
it's constantly evolving. So I don't. It's probably going to change again.
Yes, and I suppose it really is a full-time job now for somebody. I read there yesterday there's 45,000 landlords have left the market in the last 10 years. So it
Mm.
really is scary figures we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So Marcus, one of the proposed changes is dividing landlords into small landlords
Mm.
and large landlords. What impact do you see that having on the market?
Yeah, so that's a really good subject to discuss today. So effectively, just so people are really clear, they're measuring it on tenancies, not dwellings. Okay, so it's saying that you are a landlord if you have four tenancies or more. Now, I want to give you a little example of how I feel that that's completely unfair, and that it should be looked at and potentially adjusted to dwellings. How many dwellings is up for discussion. But I have a landlord. He has a property in Terranure. Traditionally, it would have been an original, lovely period family home, obviously pre-63, dating back to the 1800s, late 1800s. And by the passage of time, there are four flats stroke apartments in that. There's two at the garden level, not basement, garden level, one at the back and one at the front. And then there's one large two bed at hall level. And then on the first floor, there's another two bed. Okay. So straight away, he is categorized as a large landlord. Now, that particular property would lend itself in normal circumstances, or in the circumstances that we have actually at the moment, that he can essentially keep control of that property and then end it for the purpose of sale. And it would, and of course, with the garden and the front parking, it will be allowed. You could have a situation where you have an investor or a homeowner buy it. Okay, so that's just 4 tenancies, and he has one property. So so I think that this legislation is unfairly sort of categorizing small landlords, traditionally small landlords, in with the larger institutional landlords, and I just don't think that that's balanced.
I think it should really be moved to properties rather than tenancies, really, Marcus, to give it a fairer
Yes.
perspective there.
Now that said, the government could, the government could, will put forward a good point, and I do agree, is that if you start to say it's one property, if you have a large institutional landlord who has a block of apartments, and they might have 25 in it, and they're a professional entity, or 50, or we're seeing these giant, apartment developments, particularly in Dublin, being built. There could be 200 units in that particular building. So I sort of do understand where they're coming from, but I think more thought needs to be put into it.
I think, yeah, it needs to, there needs to be some outside the box thinking there, no doubt about it. And what are the other main proposed changes in the legislation, Marcus?
Well, I think the biggest one that's catching everybody's attention is that if you are a small landlord, and you want to sell your property during the course of the 6-year tenancy, after the 1st of March, you effectively can't do that with vacant possession. Well, not effectively, you can't. You have to sell the property with the tenant in situ. And I said on live TV during the summer, what did I feel, would be the impact of that? Well, the first one was, I said that traditionally landlords react badly when the government starts to change the legislation. Well, straight away, that prediction is there. I've discussed the percentages, the 35%. But also I said, in the second one, is that as someone who's been in the property market and selling properties, for nearly 25 plus years, and like yourself, Mayella, I would suggest that the effect on the value of the property is going to be 10 to 30%. Now, some people have asked me, well, how can you come up with such a thing? And I said, well, first of all, it's an experience thing, okay? Because I have sold apartments that there have been tenants in situ in one block, and the same block, and there's another one where it is. And so what happens there is that the landlord can get vacant possession, he can do up the apartment, he can also stage it, okay? And then it's obviously put to the open market. And that clearly, and I have experienced this, and I'm sure you have as well, Mayella.
Absolutely.
And I would suggest that every single agent in Ireland has had this experience, that the property that has the in situ tenant simply does not get the same price, so that is something I think is driving those record numbers of termination of tenancies.
And of course, you're obviously limiting the market to investors when you're selling with a tenant in
Yeah.
situ.
And then on top of
You
that,
know,
no disrespect to tenants, but I found in the past that it's quite difficult, or very difficult, to conduct viewings around their work schedule or their personal life, and that again is another barrier. I mean, when you are selling a property and you want to maximize the value, and of course, a landlord, an owner, is going to want to maximize it. They've worked hard, they've paid a mortgage, they've had it for many years, and they want to maximize their return on it. And therefore, they want vacant possession to be able to stage it, put it forward in its best light, and have an uninterrupted sales campaign with viewings taking place whenever they want. So you have good momentum and you arrive at the sale agreed period.
yeah, it's an issue. There's no doubt about it, and it will. As I agree with you in your 10 to 30%, it certainly will reduce values, reducing the value of a person's investment. No
Mm.
doubt about it.
Mm.
So Marcus, another thing big there now is the rent control is another big major topic. When can rents be reset to market value?
Effectively, when the tenant moves out of their own volition, that's it. So what we're also having is sort of a domino effect. Is that, and I'm sure you're finding this, and I've spoken actually just to three agents today on various things, and there are landlords currently, based on their profile, holding back essentially stock, valuable stock that should be there, made available until the 1st of March. So that vacant property where the tenant has moved out of their own volition can be put up to market rent. So in one respect, that sort of backfired in a way, because if this wasn't coming along, they would be tied to the rental pressure zone calculation, which would be a lot lower. One example is a place we have coming on, and it's a two-bed, and the rent is effectively at 1,900. It's €600 below the open market value, and he is waiting because he would like to get the open market rent. And I'm sure there are dozens, if not hundreds, of those examples all over the country.
Absolutely. We've four properties at the moment where the landlord is simply holding off until March to get the market rent.
Yes, yeah.
So it is a big problem. And I suppose can you see any advantages of the proposed legislation, Marcus, for our landlords?
Well, look, I tell you what, I think it's got to do with a lot of the profile of the landlord. And what I mean by that is effectively age. And I'll give you a really good example. I had a couple of conversations this week already with two different landlords. One of them is like myself, in their early 50s, and he's bought this apartment. And essentially, I've said to him, look, it's your sort of, it's control over return. Okay. So I'm saying to him, do you foresee yourself wanting to sell this property in the next 6 years? And the answer there was no, Marcus, I don't. I said, okay, well then in that case, then wait for your the 1st of March to come along. You maximize your return, and you're not really that bothered about whether or not the 6 year is there. In fact, you might welcome it. And he said, yeah, that's great advice, thank you, and he's waiting. However, I had another conversation with a couple, and they're elderly, and they're in their late 70s. Okay, we have a lovely apartment coming up there in 𝗟𝗵𝘁, and same conversation. Do you feel? And they said, absolutely, we will be selling this. So we are moving very quickly to place this up on the open market for the lettings, and we will secure a tenant before the 1st of March, so they retain that right to issue the termination of tenancy for the purpose of sale for vacant possession. So I believe that the profile of the tenant is it will dictate the decision-making process here.
It's very much an individual-based decision. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And what kind of key top tips would you give to landlords to ensure compliance going forward?
Well, I suppose top tips is really just constantly keeping on top of the articles that you're seeing. I'm doing it literally on a daily basis now, because there seems to be articles in different papers regarding upcoming legislation and so on and so forth, and just advice. So my biggest advice there is keep yourself very well informed, and just like this, jumping onto webinars like this, reading the articles and so on. And just from a point of view on your own day-to-day management, I think essentially, be mindful of maybe potentially doing assignments before you do a new letting. So that way, your original tenancy potentially, if the opportunity arises, can carry through, and therefore you won't get affected by the 1st of March 2026 piece of legislation. Now, I would like to say something before the next question there. It's very noticeable that this bill has not been published yet. Okay, so that tells me that the government and the Department of Housing is actually, realizes that there are a whole lot more unforeseen circumstances, some of which I've given you today, okay, but they probably didn't think about initially, and they're digesting that, okay, and because in the past, any bill on the change was out much quicker. I can tell you that with absolute certainty, okay? So we're the 22nd of January, and we're supposed to be having this coming in on the 1st. It has to be a bill, it has to be discussed, and then ratified, and then effectively signed in by the president, okay? So that doesn't leave a lot of time. So from my point of view, I'm thinking that maybe there potentially they might decide to push it out by 2 or 3 months and potentially seek a little bit more engagement, look at the unforeseen circumstances a bit more, particularly around the fair deal, and see how the wording and language of the final legislation can try to connect with everything.
Because fair deal is another scenario, Marcus, where I suppose there's a lot of families who are unaware of the situation they're getting into. There's incentives there for them to rent out the family home, but yet if they put in a new tenancy or in a 6 year rolling tenancy, they wish to sell it, the cover cost or whatever the case may be within those 6 years, their property can be devalued by roughly 30%.
Yeah, and look, you and I are working in this industry on a daily basis. Okay, so can you imagine a family where there's no sort of son or daughter or whatever in the property market at all, and they're just trotting along, carrying on like they used to, and just make the fair assumption that sure, if I move in a tenant, I can definitely end the tenancy if I'm going to sell it. I mean, not that but. So yeah, I would think that plenty of people who are not in the property market, have very busy lives, don't have time to be reading the incessant amount of articles that are out there setting out what's going on, will by error and lack of knowledge fall foul of this piece of legislation.
And I suppose the other thing is, even though there's a lot in the media, I suppose, about the proposed legislation, not everybody is zoned into it. I've been talking to a client recently, and she was saying that they're going buying another home, but they'll keep and they let out the other house they have. And I said, are you aware of the upcoming proposed legislation? She had no idea. So,
Yeah.
as you say, Marcus, we're in the property market, we're looking out for these things, we're aware of it. But the person who's not involved directly
Mm.
in the market, it could be complete oversight on their behalf.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example. Magella has had unforeseen circumstances. I have a number of landlords who are husband and wife, and again, it's all to do with pension and so on, long-term investment and things like that. And they do have 4 tenancies based on the properties that they own. So, do you know what they're doing? They're splitting. So they're saying that they're taking 3 and 3. Okay, so what are the ramifications now around that in regards to, let's say, when one of them dies or both of them die? It just, it's a snowball effect.
Absolutely. There's a lot of holes. There is no doubt about that. And just finally, Marcus, what impact do you think this proposed legislation will have on the rental market as a
Uh,
whole?
Sorry, Mijay, you just froze there. You said, what impact do I think that the legislation will
Will
have as a
have on
whole?
the
Is that?
rental market as a whole?
Yeah. Look, I've thought about this long and hard, and I personally believe that the government is on a journey where they want the lettings market and the properties, the tenancies within that owned by larger landlords. Okay, I truly do. I think they may. I think they potentially feel it will be an easier market to regulate, and there will be less resistance, just like what we're seeing now. Okay, and in many regards, one might say, well, that's sort of maybe quite a logical way and process to go where you have larger landlords. But there's a major problem with that, and that is this, and we discussed it I discussed this with a couple of fellow agents, is that these larger landlords, whether they're institutes or a REIT or foreign investors, whatever it is, they're focusing in on cities like Dublin, Galway, Limerick, Cork, Waterford. You know what I'm saying here. So, but are they going to be providing the extremely badly needed units, properties, apartments, houses in the Midlands, villages and towns and counties that are not these central business district hubs of the major counties in Ireland?
That is going to be an issue. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Oh, it's just absolutely without question. And so,
So
and sorry, Michelle, just say, I mean, and then that completely flies in the face of this sort of idea of village and town rejuvenation that they're trying to say. We were seeing that there's, these lovely villages and towns and so on and so forth are lacking life, and they're trying to bring it in. So, we've got
yeah,
the
absolutely.
apartments
They're
over
they're
the
they're
retail
pushing
units. So,
they're
yeah.
pushing the small landlords that are keeping those places alive out of the market, essentially.
And providing the urgent supply that's required.
Yeah. So